All right, so I guess we'll kick it off now. It's 7:30. Welcome everyone to Veteran ETA Roundtable. This is session 5. Thanks everyone for being here. Tonight, we're going to have a special guest, Elliott Holland. So just a little bit of background on Elliott. So Elliott is the founder and managing director of Guardian Due Diligence, which is a boutique firm based in Atlanta, Georgia, specializing in self-funded searchers and business acquisitions. He has over a decade of experience in middle market deals and has collaborated with top family offices, independent business buyers, and management consulting firms. Before establishing Guardian Due Diligence in 2016, he worked in private equity. Additionally, Elliott serves as the chief financial officer at Colab Capital, a growth platform for Black founders, and TTI USA, a boutique telecommunications firm. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and earned a mechanical engineering degree from both Georgia Tech and Morehouse College. Yeah, quick backstory. I ran into Elliott when I was at SM Bash last year, didn't know anyone, showed up and just had a great conversation. And I was like, oh, that's a nice guy. Like, Elliott seems cool. And didn't even know. He's so humble. He's like one of the main guest speakers. Guy's got a Harvard MBA and all that stuff. And I think that speaks volumes to the type of person he is. He'll help. He's there to help anybody out. Very no bullshit and just does a great job with what he does. I've talked to so many people that have worked with him, and he's kind of the bar for what people are looking for in financial due diligence. So really, really happy to have Elliott here and to be able to share this with this community. And just kind of before I hand it over, we'll kind of keep it as last time where, Elliott's going to present on kind of some topics. And then for the Q&A, if you guys can just put it into chat and I'll kind of moderate it. But other than that, I'm all set. So floor is yours, Elliott. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do a quick intro and then I'm going to describe the quality of earnings, assuming that not everybody may understand what it is. And then what I'd like you guys to do, I don't know veterans to be shy. So I can sort of take this anywhere that we want to go. And so like user input is probably the best way for you guys to get the most out of this. So drop a topic or an idea or something you want me to kind of riff on in the comments. And so when I get done with the intro, I can sort of go in that direction. And my my goal here is to help folks learn to go from wherever they are today to like one standard deviation more educated. So no question is out of bounds or silly. So come on with it. Um, Grew up in Ann Arbor. Got an engineering degree. Thought I'd be an engineer, but took a business route. Got lucky and went to Harvard for MBA, and I wanted to be rich, so I chose to go after private equity. But I was a dude who had worked at like a not McKinsey consulting company and came from Atlanta. And I was in business school with all the Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers folks after that kind of financial debacle. So I just ended up calling more people than everybody else. So I got 250 calls, 249 no's, and one yes. So of course I took the yes, and ended up being a kind of family office that does deals like a private equity firm, which helped me understand that owning equity was better than private equity, where the general partners actually represent pension fund equity and don't get the same upside in their deals as my boss did. And I spun out of there, had a mentor of mine team up with me, and we did independent sponsor deals, so sort of $2 to $3 million of EBITDA. And then when he effectively retired, I spun out and tried to get a deal done on my own, and frankly failed. Now the market wasn't nearly as robust then, but a failure is a failure. And so it was so bad I was driving for Lyft afterwards because I was pretty financially extended. And so I was trying to figure out how to use these skills to do something meaningful. And I realized that with a lot of first-time buyers coming into the ecosystem without the private equity experience, fancy MBA experience, going up against 65-year-old brokers, sellers who are pretty good at bullshitting, frankly. People needed a solution to help them through diligence. And frankly, I thought the audit-based CPA solution sucked because the HVAC owner in Charleston, South Carolina doesn't want a 2-page list of accounting shit that nobody can explain. And I've seen people like that mess up deals. and I knew that we could do better. So the product that I supply is quality of earnings, which essentially is a mini audit on businesses specifically for the purpose of people buying a business. So private businesses have no regulations on their financials, and you can manipulate QuickBooks, you can manipulate taxes. And so a big piece of what we do is triangulate data to make sure the numbers in the financials are reliable. Once they're reliable, then we can figure out what the EBITDA or SDE is. And once we do that, we can sort of describe the financial trends and kind of, to an extent, the operational trends in the business, so that Charlie or Keith or Alex or Nick can make an informed decision and get a deal across the finish line. And then where I think we're lethal and better than everybody else is with messy data sets. A lot of accounting firms, if they can't get you 100% confidence in an answer, don't want to put it in a report. And that just ain't the place where we live and do deals. You're never going to get perfect data sets. And then also, we try to wrap all of our financial diligence stuff, so our quality of earnings, with kind of no nonsense business intelligence. What does that mean? I helped a client kill a deal this week. He was buying a digital marketing company. So it's almost like you should have SaaS retention, very little churn. We looked at the numbers, the revenue and the profit was there, but the business had about 40 customers at any given time, but lost double that, or like 80 to 90 customers a year. So they were churning like 20% a month. And so I'm talking to my client, like, the numbers in their truest sense tie out. But dude, do you want to buy a digital marketing agency where you have to actually sell 2 times the number of clients you have at any given time in the next 12 months? And do you think about what that implies about the service, the product, the delivery, how good they are at delivering digital marketing? And so once again, that's not a revenue line item. That's not an EBITDA line item, but it's a reason to walk away from a deal. And that's sort of what we try to bring to folks. Now, I kind of described what I do, who I am, one example. Does that make sense to folks? Are there any questions so far?
Not seeing anything in the chat. That makes sense, Elliott. Thanks.
So I'll go into a couple of the things that I hear a lot in the marketplace and my point of view on them. Now, it's a point of view, right? Less than $4 to get you a 4 for 4 at Wendy's. But I don't like selling the quality of earnings to people who don't want them. I kind of am only speaking to the people who are risk understanding enough to not want to go take on a personal guarantee without knowing if the numbers are solid. So first myth, I guess I'll debunk. We'll do Twitter language. The SBA doesn't require me to do a quality of earnings, man. Why would I pay for it? The SBA is underwriting all kinds of bull junk. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you think about their recourse, or sort of how they get covered. So 75% to 90% of those loans are covered by the government. Typically, seller notes 10%, so another 10% is covered by the seller. And then typically it's 10% equity, so another 10% covered by you, the buyer. And then they have a personal guarantee, which is so Trump type that even if you buy a terrible business, you may go get a job to pay off the debt so you don't go bankrupt. So if I'm just being a capitalist and I'm sitting at Live Oak, Byline Bank, First Bank of the Lake, I'm underwriting everything. Why not? Whatever money the company doesn't pay me back. Charlie, you paying me back. I see the nice sweater, brother. You probably got some family or something up there, man. You're not going to the poorhouse and the bankruptcy train, You guys all look like astute professionals. And so when you really think about what they're underwriting, and also if you hear not Lisa, but Heather and Dressen said it on Twitter, the SBA loans are some of the most profitable loan products at the bank. So not only are they guaranteed, they're over collateralized from a guarantee perspective, but they're also the most profitable things at the bank. So what am I underwriting? Everything. So who gets stuck when the deal closes and it stinks. The bank's getting their money. You're not ducking the government on a personal guarantee. The seller got his money. The lawyers got their money. The quality of earnings folks, we got our money. And so you're now living a lonely life headed towards the poorhouse slowly. So that's why you get it, even though it's not required. Another thing that I hear a lot is, well, my deal's $1 million, simple business. I don't really want to do a QOE, man. Like, it's just, it's too much of it's too high of a percentage of my deal size. It's not prudent. So I'm gonna do something less. And when I think about that, I'm like, that sounds stupid. I don't know anybody that's got $1 million to lose. And I don't know a investment that forces you to bet as big as an entrepreneur because of the personal guarantee. I also don't know a scenario that's set up the same for fraudulent, fishy, story-like behavior, right? When a seller knows that they're getting 3 to 5 times every dollar of EBITDA they can convince you is there that's not there, it's one of the biggest motivating times for even an honorable person to lie, right? And so what I hear a lot is, well, I trust the seller. He's got 4 kids, been married 30 years, deacon in his church, coaches Little League, he's just, I really believe it. And I just stopped listening to it. I'm like, God, I don't want to hear about what he does outside of sell you a crummy business, because I've been on the short end of a seller who was all of those things, but was only selling me the business because, and I'm not being political, I'm being just specific to the situation. He thought Hillary Clinton was going to win an election, and that was going to put some regulation in his business that was going to screw it. And so he was going to try to sell the thing to me before the election happened. And when Trump won, he was like, no, I want to keep it. But all the stuff that he told me about why he wanted to sell, all the stuff that he told me about how great of an owner I would be and how he was done with the business were lies, right? But he was a deacon in the church, 3, 4 kids. And so it's interesting, but not relevant. Now, I saw a question pop up. Very easy, Quentin. So we will refund 100% of the quality of earnings fees at close, so you can actually wrap them into your deal costs. Therefore, you can finance them with debt. Now, we're too small to take deals on contingency. If I was some big accounting firm and I can get your tax work, your audit work, your ongoing accounting work, and I had a big business development budget, I could do it. My business development budget is my bank account, so I'm a little less likely to do it. I also, in my opinion, fight too gosh darn hard to be worried about getting paid. And frankly, if you knew the thought process as I had to go through in these deals, you wouldn't ever make me worried about getting paid. Because the work, when I think the deal is wonky, turns into almost like a private investigator. Now forgive this analogy, but I think you guys will get it. It's almost like you're back in college and your best friend's girl is cheating on her, right? But if you tell him that you think she's cheating, he's gonna hate you. If you tell him you saw the gal at the bar with another dude, he's like, oh no, that's her friend, that's her play brother, they've known each other since middle school. To really convince your buddy that his girl is cheating, you almost need pictures of them in the act. That private investigator, like in the bushes all night, you know what I mean, taking the pictures. And so when deals are wonky, because I work with first-time buyers, I'm not speaking to some Yale MBA dude about accrual accounting and how the accruals are off and the prepaids are off in the back. No. I'm talking to a regular person, everyday Main Street guy or gal. And so I end up having to do all that. And in those moments, to deliver the bad news, I know that the deal's less likely to close, which means I'm less likely to get paid. If I'm worrying about if I'm getting paid, you guys can sort of see the conflict there. I'm having to do the hardest work to save you the most money, keep you out of the poorhouse, but I'm worried about getting paid, which is why some of the contingency stuff with some of the other firms, when the rubber really hits the road, I understand why people do it to not have to come out of their pocket, but I wonder, is it doing themselves a disservice? I see some questions. Kick off a QOE. I need 4 to 6 weeks from when I get the due diligence data. So I have a list of about 40 items that I need to do my work. And when I get 80% of those, I'll be 4 to 6 weeks done. The difference is 4 weeks is typically not a lot of questions and information and answers to questions coming quickly. The 6 weeks is sort of more questions and the answers coming back slower. Will banks need a QOE? Preferred firms they'll accept it from. It's more on a deal by deal basis where banks decide they need equality of earnings. And I wish there was some like rubric somewhere where it was like, if this and the other were true, they need a QOE, but it's sort of like if they're having an issue with the numbers or it's a larger deal, or maybe you're a newer searcher or they've had issues in the industry before, they may request equality of earnings. Now, preferred firms, I would say there's probably 5 or 6 firms in the small and medium business arena that 80 or 90% everybody uses, and we all know the lenders probably better than some of our clients do. So I don't know if there's a preferred list anywhere, but I think we're all preferred, the ones that are on Twitter, the folks that that's probably the most active community for people. So they're in Search Funder. If you ask, hey, who's a good QOE person, the 4 or 5 names that'll come up, me being one of them most times, are kind of qualified providers. If you're concerned about that, ask your banker, hey, I'm gonna consider using A, B, and C firm. Will that be an issue? And they'll let you know if it will be an issue. So you don't have to kind of go into it dark. All right, I think I answered the questions that were again. So where do QOEs go sideways? And I've actually had to learn a lot of this on the job, meaning like Harvard didn't teach me this. Even private equity didn't teach me this. But if let's take the point of view of I am Steve, the slick seller, right? And I want to sell Charlie on the fact that I've got $1 million of EBITDA to get $4 million from him to bankrupt his family and for me to go live in South America, smiling, drinking drinks with umbrellas in it for the rest of my life. There are a lot of things that I can do to make it simple to get that done. First off, let me go hire a shady broker. And there's more than enough shady brokers out there to hire. The broker will then say, hey, I'm financially smart. I checked the numbers first, Charles. So don't worry, man. I kind of kicked the tires. These are solid, clean numbers. The broker ain't got no CPA. What do we talk? What did you check? What did you look at? Nothing. So then they put it in a nice glossy sim. And any issue that they see, they're gonna have like a list of like 5 or 10 stories to cover it up, right? The seller's always in the business 15 hours a week, or he's remote, or he's got a general manager. The product or service is always best in market, and they just don't need to do any marketing because they get referrals, yada, yada, yada. Moreover, the broker knows that at $1 million of EBITDA, I can sell this business to almost anybody. At 600K of SDE, there's a way smaller market for the business. So they're adding extra stuff back. They're covering up stuff. If the financials are really wonky, and I've seen this happen, they'll hire a new firm to go redo the financials. And they might not even tell you about the old accounting firm that have been doing the books for 20 years. And so you get into this deal and you're excited to get it under letter of intent, and you don't know they've been setting up for 6 months to defraud you out of your money. And so the quality of earnings is a strong enough tool to get to the bottom of most bull crap. And that's why you get it done. And I've said this recently, last year was one of the weirdest years I've been in business because about 40% of the deals that I worked on from a quality of earnings perspective were completely fraudulent. Not messy financials, not off by 10 or 15%, but like there was a client I had trying to buy a security company, like man security for different, like Staples Center kind of stuff, right? And the dude had about $5 million of revenue, but only $4 million of invoices. And so we were bugging him about the last $1 million of invoices, bugging week 1, week 2, week 3. So then he starts saying, oh man, well, all of our invoices are in paper. They're in these boxes in my office. You know, you want me to send 28 boxes to you? What do you need out of the invoices? Oh, let me get my bookkeeper. Maybe she can answer the question. And so by the week 3 or 4, I call my client. I'm like, do you believe this? Do we really still believe this dude in 2023 has got 28 boxes full of paper invoices that he can't scan one box to get the process started of validating this stuff? And do you really think that he's sending us to his bookkeeper because he doesn't understand, or does he want somebody less responsible for the answer to add confusion to the situation? And so what he more than likely did is deposited $1 million into the bank account, hoping that somebody would believe it's revenue, therefore giving him $1 million of fake EBITDA that somebody was going to pay a multiple on when he was actually running a break-even business. And that's the kind of bull swank you get into in fraudulent deals. I see a couple of questions here. So John has a couple of questions. Holdbacks, range of cost. All right, so holdbacks are helpful in a range. So let's say it's a $4 million purchase price. You can probably get a 20% seller note, or maybe up to 20% in holdbacks, escrows and whatnot. So that's 800K. So on a $4 million deal, if your issue is less than 800 grand, then holdbacks can save you. If your issue's half the purchase price, the holdbacks aren't going to save you. And so earnouts are the same way. A lot of times with first-time buyers, and it's not even a silly comment, but it's just lack of experience. It's like, oh, well, I don't believe the numbers, but I'll just do an earnout to cover my risk. And it's like, well, nobody's taking like $1 million at close and a $3 million earnout. And if the numbers are completely wonky, the earnout doesn't save you, because most of the time you're gonna have to put down at least 60-70% of purchase price. What are the price ranges? I would say 15 to 30 grand for quality of earnings for a deal, $2 to $10 million in purchase price. There's probably a little bit of flexibility on the top and the bottom of that range, but that's about it. It just depends on who's doing it, how good they are, all that kind of stuff. Brand name comes into play there. And then, so John, I would tear up reviewed financials and throw them in the toilet. And even audits are, so let me be real. Let me take my guardian hat off. Like, forget me running a QOE firm. Let me just be your guys' best friend for a second. So reviewed means somebody paid me the least amount possible to do a little bit more than just taking whatever the owner said and putting it in a 3-page document to send as the financials. When you look at the procedures for reviewing, it's kind of like I look at the receipts twice instead of once. So reviewed financials feel like there's some work that was done, but there really wasn't any work that's done. And moreover, sometimes doing half the work or a third of the work actually creates more confusion than doing none of it at all. Because none of it at all, which is just compiled financials, means I didn't look at it at all. So all of the diligence work is on you, whereas reviewed makes a lot of people think that there's some protection there that isn't. And then the issues with audits sometimes is that no accounting firm is going to turn down an audit request. So if you're at ABC accounting firm and you want to get your deal sold because say it's going off a cliff, if you go to that firm and say, hey, I want to audit, oh yeah, we can do an audit. That doesn't mean they're actually any good at audits. And because nobody had to make a decision based on that audit, although they're more clean than most financial sets, because nobody had to rely on them to make a $3-4 million buying decision, oftentimes there's stuff that they miss. Also, audits are typically done on an annual basis, which doesn't get into the monthly complexity of a lot of businesses. And you can say, I don't need the monthly complexity. Yeah, you don't until you have a working capital issue. And then you're going to wish that you had gotten into the monthly detail there. So um, those are answers to those questions. How does a searcher with limited funds pay for QOE? Um, I'm going to answer this differently. We're all grown here. Well, you cannot pay for it and pay for it with your life, your financials, and your family. Because I tell you, the folks that like lose on a $3 million bet, um, your family may leave you. You may never get back into financial health again. Mental health will be an issue you have, and a lot of us don't make it out of that. So you can pay for it kind of with your ass if you don't want to pay for it on the front end. I would argue that if you don't have the cash or quality of earnings, I would borrow it rather than not get one done. And I wouldn't mess with, like, I wouldn't go get a Walmart QOE. I did a video, it hasn't launched yet. I filmed it yesterday. I was like, well, if you go to war, you need a bulletproof vest. Do you go to Walmart to get it, or do you go to the place that actually does bulletproof vests really well? Because if you get shot and that bullet goes through, that's catastrophic risk, right? This is kind of the same kind of risk. So I don't think you're shopping at Walmart for this kind of stuff. How would I conduct a search in 2023, knowing what I do for my past? I would move quicker. I think people waste a lot of time. And in the three main ways I think they waste time, you get such an incomplete data set before a letter of intent. And some people are like, I'm going to take these 20 pages in a sim and I'm going to go talk to 20 people off of LinkedIn. And I'm going to spend a week and a half looking at the industry. And then because when I write that letter of intent, I'm going to be ready to close it. I'm going to be really dialed in. And the deal was under the letter of intent 2 days after you got the sim, and you wasted 2 weeks doing analysis that didn't help you at all. So you got to move quicker. I think people take the letter of intent, which is a non-binding legal document, far too seriously. It's really nothing more than an offer to buy a business. You should be sending 5 to 10 of those a month if you're really serious about buying a business. Now, somebody may laugh at me and whatever, but Michael Girdley, who's got a lot more Twitter followers than I do, he said he looked at something like 1,700 deals last year. And so when you start looking at the folks that are really in the game, that are really doing this, the numbers that they're going through are way more than the average Joe Schmo. So I think that's one thing I would do differently. I would also, as a first-time buyer, a lot of my clients are too soft on the seller. So like I actually had to have a come to Jesus moment with a client yesterday. And sort of, and a lot of my clients are like mid-career folks. So like at the stuff that they do, they're brilliant. This guy had scaled a startup company in the lawn care space and sold it for, probably 40-50 million bucks. So he's brilliant in that, but he wants to be brilliant in this. So I send him my 40-item due diligence list, and he's trying to tell me stuff on my list that isn't important because it's an asset sale, or because the guy doesn't have that, a revenue recognition policy. That seems like for bigger deals. And so I work for the dude. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna let it fly. And then last night, he was trying to get my confirmation that some of these issues, we could pass them up on the list. And I was like, everything that you said is done on that list that we didn't get data on makes the quality of the service you paid for less valuable because I can't do my work. And so what you're telling me is, hey, Elliott, if you find issues halfway through the deal, I'll just mitigate it with a bigger seller note or holdbacks or whatever, because I want to be nice to the seller. And I'm like, so by being nice and smiling with the seller week one, you're setting them up for a big surprise and being a pain in the behind day 60, right? where I think we're way better off setting the tone that this is going to be a detailed process, but we're not going to surprise you. Let's get the data now. Well, Elliot, are some of those things like, are they really important? You know, are they more than 10% of EBITDA? I'm like, dude, I just started the process yesterday. I don't know if any of this stuff is 10% of EBITDA, but what I tell you is nothing on that list is for play. And I used to have 4-page lists. Now it's 40 items. And you're telling me 15 of my 40 items I should look over. You're basically telling me that you want to completely undermine my ability to do my work. But a lot of first-time buyers take the advice that the seller relationship is the most important and over index on that. So I would do that differently. I tell a lot of my clients, like, you got to walk in like you're a Brinks truck, even if you don't have the personality for it or don't yet feel that powerful, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, success is you bringing a $2-3 million Brinks truck to the seller. And if you don't treat the process like that, sellers sniff weakness like, you know, the best animals in the jungle. That's how I do it differently. Timeline for engaging financial DD after going on the letter of intent. Within a week. I think waiting longer than a week ends up putting a lot more pressure on your deal than it gives you any benefit. Oh, Elliot, but I want to kick the tires. I want to look at this and look at that. And what I would say is most people aren't specialized enough to get any real data out of the stuff you want to kick the tires on. And I know for a fact, I get a lot of calls. Had a client this week who we had an issue in QOE that shouldn't have been a problem with the timeline, but he chose to spend a month kicking the tires while he's working a full-time job and a husband and got 4 kids. Didn't really get anything done, but now he's 30 days behind the timeline. So now this like 2 or 3 week thing we needed to do is now creating catastrophic risk. And that's what happens when you wait more than a week, in my opinion. And I'm not sure you get much value for that. Woo! I got to read this one out loud. So in your experience, how often, and John, I'm having fun because who wants to hear about something boring on a Wednesday night? I'm not laughing at you. I'm trying to keep everybody from going to sleep. In every purchase agreement, the seller attests to the financials are accurate. Every single one. I've been looking at purchase agreements for 15 years. I can write one at this point. Every single seller attests to that. And what I think people misunderstand is what the true legal ramifications of lying actually are. So first off, nobody's worried about tax fraud. Why? When the tax man says you screwed up, they come to you 2 or 3 years later, they catch some of the stuff that you lied about, and they give you 2 or 3 years to pay it back. So only like the people who are like, I'm not paying, and when they come after me, I'm still not going to pay, are really worried about tax fraud. And honestly, they're not worried. They're just like, I'll just go to jail. I'll do the bid, right? So nobody's really worried about tax fraud explicitly. And then what about I lied in the purchase agreement? So you asked the question earlier about holdbacks. This is similar to the holdback discussion. So let's back up. So let's go through real recourse. So who's my man top left? Chris. All right, Chris, let's do a little quick role play, man. All right. So I pay you $4 million for a business, right? And you promised me everything is in the purchase agreement. Your financials are accurate. You didn't defraud me. You didn't make anything up, right? I got a 10% seller note. So I think I said 4 million. So 10% seller note, 400 grand. Let's say you're a lying person. Now you're not in real life, but let's say, you know, the next Chris that walks by here, he's a liar. So let's say you just lied, right? You took home 3.6 million bucks. And I'm actually having to go prove in a court of law that not that you didn't understand accounting, not that you're not a CPA and couldn't have possibly understood, not that somebody else on your team did it, not that your bookkeeper messed it up, it wasn't you, but that I got to prove that you knowingly lied to me, right? By the time I prove that, let's just say I do, how much of that $400,000 that I could probably claw back, how much of it do you still have in bank accounts that you own?
Probably not much.
No, zero. Pyrrhic victory. So in court, I can be like, man, I pinned that guy, Chris. I made him pay for it, man. He lied and I proved it. But from a true recourse perspective, that money's gone. That's like these $87 million defamation cases that get won, and the person's living on Section 8. Who's paying that 87 million? It's not getting paid. And so this is akin to the used car lot. Some of you guys may have bought a used car, right? Whatever you don't check before you leave that lot, there's no coming back. And CarMax may be a better option than Johnny's cars down the road, but even CarMax is not taking that car back if you figured out something that they didn't divulge. So you got to be really careful about thinking that some of these like verbal or sort of legal ramifications or solutions truly work. I've been an expert witness in a court case, and the lawyer was like, yeah, nobody's going to see any money in this. This is just because the buyer wants to be able to tell his investors who he lost money, that he did everything to be good to them. But it was really a silly entrepreneur that should have told his investors that I'm not throwing good money time after bad, right? We're all big boys and we made a mistake. So, John, this is really like used car lot, man. Buyer beware. And frankly, one of the other challenges in this marketplace, and let me say this too, I still think this is by far the best way for everyday folks to get wealthy, not rich, wealthy. So I also run my own business. I'm an optimist, but when my clients pay me, I'm paid to be a pessimist. So when I talk, I speak of pessimism. That does not mean I think the whole thing sucks. In fact, I wouldn't be doing this if I thought the pathway to wealth through this mechanism sucks. And let's just be clear about why. You can't get 90% debt anywhere else. The private equity firms out there don't get it, right? And so the fact that everyday folks can go into a bank and get 90% debt and 95% debt if the seller notes on 24-month full standby, 95% debt, it's unheard of. And for that loan instrument to have a 2.6% default rate, it's incredible. But that doesn't mean on your individual deal you can't get screwed. So I was talking about kind of the situation around these deals. I think people need to be better at recognizing that you have to be 100% sure that sort of the main areas in the thesis that make you want to buy a business are indeed intact, because everybody's assuming the buyer is the smartest person at the table. You're the one bringing the Brinks truck. And honestly, a judge isn't even going to be all that sympathetic to you, right? You had the stones to go use 95% debt to go buy this thing. I thought you were I'll never lose capital.com and you have all these accolades, you know. It's tough. And that's why what I do is so important, because I'm the most important piece of diligence you'll do en route to getting your deal closed. I catch the most BS. Like the lawyers mitigate risk in their documents, right? I catch the risk that they mitigate. And so that's why my service is so mission critical. And that's why like all the questions about should I pay, how do I afford it, I'm cash constrained, which I get because I've been a self-funded searcher. So I'm not speaking about stuff I don't understand, but it's sort of like I didn't do my own QOE. John, did I do okay, man? I've been tearing apart some of your comments, bro. I hope we're still friends. All right, good stuff. I want to make this most helpful for you guys. So I've kind of explained what I do, what it is, reason you do it. I've explained a couple of examples of fraud. So basically told a couple of war stories. I've debunked a couple of things you guys put in the chat. What's the thing you guys always want to know about due diligence? Or what scares you the most about having an interest in buying a business, but knowing it's the used car lot. And once you drive that car off the lot, there's no take back. I mentioned the 2.6 default rate. Bro, all the time, Charles. So the 2.6 actually understates the full size of the issue. So I have a case study on my website where a woman came into my funnel and talked to me about doing a QOE and then decided to do it herself. And I remember she was ranting and raving on LinkedIn. Oh, I did it myself. You don't need those QOE people. I closed the deal too. The bank underwrote it. I'm smart. Look at me. A year later, she was on Will Smith's podcast, The Crime Minds, saying, hey, there's a 60% chance my business is going to go bankrupt, or I'm going to go bankrupt because my business is going to shut down. And then 3 weeks later, which I could have told you when she did it, she had to shut the business down. Now, here's the reality about that situation. She was working at Apple before she bought the business, and her husband's in tech too. So they may be pulling $400,000 or $500,000 into their household. I think the loan was like 2.5 million. It's very likely to protect their assets, they will pay the loan off with proceeds from their day jobs. In fact, they had called me a couple weeks after that podcast hit, and they were going to try to get the husband to buy a company to try to get out of the debt that the wife had gotten into with her do-it-yourself QOE. And so what ends up happening is, Charles, a lot of folks struggle and either pay it off with earnings from their next job, or let's talk about this. Think about, you thought you were going to get like that 30% IRR that everybody talks about, but you actually get 3% IRR and spend 10 years working at a lower salary with lower upside than anything else you could have done. You lose all your hair, you gain 40 pounds. You didn't default on the loan, but you kind of defaulted on life, you know? You almost probably would have been better off cutting your losses and going spending 9 years doing something else. And then also, the reason why I speak about the young lady who was on the podcast is because I respect her immensely for being honest enough to get on the podcast and kind of air her dirty laundry. Most people don't. Most people, like, they were, I'll never lose capital, and then like you never hear from them again. You know, if you're not that person's best friend, you know, they'll never do anything risk neutral again. They're probably going to go work for the government after this. Like, I want a guaranteed check kind of thing. So the reason that you do the diligence is because the downside isn't just like, bad deal isn't like a bad week or like a bad year. It's 10 years where you're essentially working for the bank, right? Because you'll forego your salary to make sure the bank gets their money. And so you're going to spend years working for the bank's money. And then as soon as you pay them back, there's not going to be anything for you. And then let's be honest, a lot of us as searchers are way further down the path of wanting to do this than our partners and our families, right? So they're trusting us to make a good decision with family resources. And so when you get in this thing and you're messed up, and now you were a 8 out of 10 partner, and now you only have the energy to be 4 out of 10, right? Although people who love you will do the best to understand, you put yourself behind the 8 ball, right? In a way where, like, it's going to be hard for somebody to tell you, because you're struggling, how much harm you've done to the situation. So the default rate is accurate. It's government information, but I don't think it fully states the challenge here. Are fees different in the case of a broken deal? So what we try to do, we prorate our fees over 4 weeks, and we get you a preliminary data book within 2 weeks. We catch probably 85 to 90% of deal breakers in that initial data book. And so what ends up happening for most of the deals, where the numbers are materially off, we report that 2 weeks out of 4, so the people pay half. So I killed 3 deals this week because the numbers suck. All those clients are going to pay half because we found it in 2 weeks. So that's how we do it. Other people do it differently, but that's how we kind of keep that deal fees. We also offer 20 to 30% discounts to second time clients. So I have 2 clients right now that did deals with me last year where we kicked them out, and now they're 30% less on their next QOE, just because once you're in the family, we try to help facilitate a good deal for you. Brian, what scares you the most is having to pay for more. Yeah. So Brian, I'm gonna tell you that I fully understand that, which is why we give the discount on the second deal, which is why we kick most of the bad ones out in 2 weeks. Um, but a lot of people, and honestly, the common knowledge and the overall mantra of like the self-funded search is like spend no money until the last absolute minute, which generally makes sense. But let me give another analogy. So like dead deal fees are a lot like dead date fees. So let me run it on like the dead date fee thing. Like, hey man, I'm looking for a wife. This wife is probably going to be the most important decision I make in my entire life. I'm going to have kids with this person, build a family with this person, love this person through sickness, health, the whole thing, right? But you know what? Like, I don't really want dead date fees. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be dating girls in high school and dating girls in college and like taking girls out that aren't going to be the one and like having all these dinners and deep conversations because it's not going to be allocated towards an actual wife, like a closed wife. So I want to minimize my dead date fees. What do you think of that? And we'd all say, dude, that's stupid. The only way you're going to get a good wife, partner, the only way you're going to make a good decision on something this magnitude is almost by definition, you're going to have to fail a couple of times en route to it. I would actually say a potentially better way to think about it is, hey, let me budget 1.5 to 2 half QOEs because the partners I'm going to work with are going to basically keep me at half the cost if it's messed up. And then let me do that so that I'm not worried about when I see a deal that I think is the Michael Jordan of acquisitions, that I'm screwing up my chances to close it because I'm worried about my budget if it doesn't work. Does that make sense? Because like you don't find too many like Michael Jordan deals in a lifetime, really. Certainly not in a year or two. And and each hesitance, like if you knew for doggone sure it was the Michael Jordan deals and you could close it, you spend almost any dollar you had in your bank to close it. But you don't know, so you're like half stepping, so you're like playing to lose. So I would almost encourage you to um do whatever you need to do to get a budget of about, three QOEs. And hopefully you don't need it, but that way you're not thinking with like cash strap brain on 7-figure upside. And Brian, I don't know you, brother. I'm talking to you like my best friend, man. So again, forgive me, but that's how I feel about it. Um, Guidance on 3 to 4 key red flags in the PLL or balance sheet. Yeah. Um, the one I've been seeing the most lately. So, and you guys should hear this. So we've had 12, 13 years of great economy and then kind of a wonky one last year, and where I think we're still trying to figure out where we are, right? What happened last year, I think a lot of sellers needed that 3 million, 4 million, $5 million to retire. And for 12 years, they could have gotten it, but they waited too long, right? So now their numbers don't add up to what they need to be to get that, let's call it 5 million bucks. So what are they doing? Making shit up. Ellie, what do you mean making shit up? These are no, they're making shit up. And one of the main ways you see it is so most of these deals are going to have some growth in the last year because it's really hard to buy a company that's decreased in size. So they'll grow 30% in revenue, right? But one of their main cost lines will decrease 20%. And they'll have some 2-paragraph story in the confidential information memorandum on how they increase revenue 30% and decrease the biggest cost on the P&L by 20%. And the story will qualitatively make sense. So I'm dealing with one right now, a import export company that sits at the dock out on the West Coast. Let's keep it there. They increased revenue by 50%, EBITDA is up 4x. But the biggest driver of the EBITDA increase was that their subcontractor expense that was like 40% of revenue is now like 25% of revenue. How'd that happen? I had another one in Southern Florida. It was a husband and wife. And I knew for a fact that the reason their subcontractor expense had gone down is because they were paying people under the table. And I ended up kind of going sideways with my client because he just didn't want to believe it. And I just wasn't okay with sending a husband and a wife into financial ruin over something they didn't understand, but I had seen so many times. So that's one way. Second way is on the balance sheet. Most people don't understand the balance sheet, Charles. So the biggest red flag issue on the balance sheet is customer deposits and understanding. You don't need a CPA, but just like stay with me for 3 minutes and I'll explain what it is. So like landscaping company, let's make it simple, right? As an owner, what I can do is I can send a notice out to all my customers like, hey, why don't you prepay for the first quarter of 2024? I'll give you a 20% discount. Have half of your client base do that. And what you should do if you're being reasonable is put that onto the balance sheet as a prepaid liability because the owner, the seller took cash, right, for the first quarter of services, and you're going to have to service those clients for the next 3 months, right? But what they're actually oftentimes trying to do is sell you the business after they took the deposit in cash and talk about how they don't understand the balance sheet. So you need to be very clear about sort of all of a sudden revenue boosted in like Q4 of 2023. And it's not easily explainable because there's probably people prepaid services and he's trying to sell it before you figure that out. Those are the ones that I'm seeing the most. The other one is just these small businesses typically don't want extra systems. But I've seen here recently a whole bunch of small businesses with like, we do pay. I got one right now, medical company. We do payables in QuickBooks. We have a homegrown system that does our operating system stuff and revenue. Our accountant does our fixed assets. And as you start having these 4, 5, 6, 7 systems you have to look at, all of a sudden, there's always a story on why this one doesn't match that one and that one doesn't match this one, which is oftentimes the story in technology. But what's really happening is they're saying, hey, I'm trying to confuse you with the number of these systems. And if you don't recognize that really there should be the same truth in each system to a large degree, or you should probably run for the hills. That's the other one that I keep seeing again and again, Charles. So I don't do deal sourcing anymore, honestly, because it's a cheap service. And I think it undermined my credibility as an M&A advisor and QLE professional. And frankly, and you guys may appreciate this, it's like hooking your friend up with like 20 amazing women in college and he doesn't call any of them. And then he's mad at you because he's going to say something about the people you tried to hook him up with. So I kept bringing like hundreds of deals to these clients. And then they'd be mad at me because they chose not to pursue them. And then so much of my business is word of mouth that I decided to stop doing it. Now, what I do have is I have a pre-LOI program and a deal closing society, which are pre-LOI advisory services. And with those services, I'll give you access to my database of 1,500 business brokers or 700 websites to list deals. And so my clients who are on those services get access to deal flow enablers, but I don't do deal sourcing by itself. But I absolutely do deal advisory, and I've launched new services to help with that. And then later this year, I'll be launching a class. And just to give you guys a preview of why it's different than everybody else's, I think like the Walker Dybels, the Cody Sanchez's, Jeremy Harbers, they do a good job of like how to, like 101 of deal execution. But a lot of those folks that have come and graduated from those classes come to me and still don't know how to do a deal because those classes don't teach you how to like execute, like how to take it from I know how to do it to like I close this deal 3 months from now. Kind of like I call it like bulldogging, like in the rodeo, like you got to grab that calf and drag it to the ground. And so my class is going to be like 100% dedicated to once you found that Michael Jordan deal, how to close that son of a gun and how to have the right mentality, the tactics, the screens, the documents, and like the discretion to be able to differentiate between what I call like unsavory things, like a fart in the elevator or like the mosquito in your bedroom on vacation, from like deal breakers, which I think a lot of times people get tripped up over the unsavory thing. But I also think, Charles, frankly, a lot of my QOE customers, and I have some testimonies on my website, they would tell you that probably at least 30% of the value of the Guardian quality of earnings is that it's more than just EBITDA. A lot of them, I'm helping them negotiate stuff on their deal. So even though they have a lawyer who can like write up a good business solution to a challenge, they would know whether it's an earn out, a holdback, an escrow, a run away from the deal, go dark for a week and then come back and tell the dude he needs to take a 40% haircut. Like these things that we find in QOE, what do you do with them to either continue with the deal and still get one done that makes sense or to walk away? Most of my clients, at least 30% of the value they probably see is from that M&A advisory component. And you sort of get a base level alongside our quality of earnings and a bigger piece if you started with us on a pre-LOI basis, just because it's really hard to help somebody like optimize negotiation on a poorly structured letter of intent.
Awesome. How quickly do you recommend people to kind of get their deal team squared away? Like from you, lawyer, et cetera?
I think you should have 2 or 3 options that you're thinking about all the time.
Okay.
Consume their content, try to find people that work with them, understand their pricing and whatnot. And the reason being is like all of us get to capacity sometimes. Or you may find a deal that's got some weird, obscure accounting system that Elliott might not be an expert in. So you might have had me number 1 on your list, but you need to go to one of my competitors because they may know this accounting system better. So I would have that for like both sets. And I think once you found 2 or 3 that you like, we all know that when somebody hits us up, hey, I need to start a quality of earnings. If we don't get to you in 24 hours, we probably lost the lead. So we're all pretty good at getting back to folks. So I think once you have a couple on your list, you're kind of good to go.
Awesome.
And I would say in terms of like, when do you need it in your process? I would say when you're thinking about sending your first letter of intent, you should probably be thinking, hey, I should probably start this process. And more than likely your first letter of intent won't get accepted. So by the time you're sending your third, I would say you probably want to have some idea of who your deal team may be.
All right. I think we're right at 8:30. Do you have anything you'd like to close with, Elliott, or anything else you'd like to discuss? This has been absolutely terrific. Thank you so much. Like, I'm getting lots of texts being like, blah, 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 this is eye-opening stuff. So I really, really appreciate this.
I love it that I was able to share a couple of things you guys should know. So I'm pretty sure I have the biggest database of free resources for self-funded searches on the internet. So the resource library on my website, you can catch it in the top menu, has an incredible like blogs. I've been on 65 podcasts. I've got a bunch of YouTube videos. So between there and my YouTube channel that has over 150 videos, and my resource library on the website is searchable, very easy. YouTube, I'm still reeling it in a bit, but I think the video delivery of this kind of data, this nuanced data, is a better delivery. So I still think it's worth the time in its current state. Go check those places out. I would say that I want you to know about me. I'm an advocate for everybody to get a deal done. And I know I won't be the perfect QOE solution for all of you guys, but I always want my door to be available. Sometimes people go with other folks and I'm not upset at all. And then they get halfway through their QOE or they get into a situation they need some help. I always want you guys to feel comfortable getting a hold of me. My phone number and email are on my website. I'm very easy to catch. So leverage me to the best of your ability in your deal. Good luck to everyone, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Elliot.